It's my pleasure to introduce our speakers, Angela Stottenberg from Rainforest Action Network. She's Associate Director of Digital Engagement there. And before joining RAND, she worked in direct response partnering with progressive nonprofits like Center for Victims of Torture, Finca International, Greenpeace USA, Public Citizen, Wilderness Society. That is like quite the slate of experience there. So lots of expertise here to advance their fundraising and marketing programs. Her expertise is in identifying and implementing digital technologies and strategies to meet program needs. And she has a master's in gender and women's studies from the University of Arizona, right down the street from me. So a state over, but in the Southwest, everything's far away. So next we have Brian Kassler, who is with our accredited partner, Foresight Studios. Brian specializes in solving difficult and complex fundraising challenges for engaging networks clients, crafting holistic solutions that help them meet their ambitions. He got to start within the social impact sector, organizing anti-war veterans, and he works for Salsa Labs as a sales engineer, and then later as their partner manager. He and the Foresight team are the brains behind so many things with Engaging Networks, but to name a few, Engaging Networks page templates, the EN Grid, an open source framework for supercharging EN pages, and just so much more. And Brian, if you've ever known and met Brian, expert on all things EN. So we're really excited to have him and Angela both here. So I'm going to hand things off to Brian. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Angela.
Thanks, Austin, for that incredible introduction. And thank you, Angela. Something we'll talk about later. You all have been using marketing tools longer than any organization that I know. So I think you bring kind of a wealth of experience that hopefully, as those questions come in, some might be technical, which I'll be able to jump in and answer. And others, I think, are going to be about that lived experience of using it every day, which you're the perfect person to help answer that. So I just want to talk about what we're going to cover today. This is not one-to-one with every slides, but we will cover these topics by the end. I want to make sure that everybody understands what marketing tools is. So we're going to take a very quick couple minutes just to talk about that, so everybody is on the same page. Then I'm going to share kind of the questions that you should be thinking about and asking as you prepare to do a build out on marketing tools, whether this is migration from Email Classic or you're a new EN client doing your first build out. These are going to apply in both. Many of the questions in there are going to apply in both scenarios. We're also going to talk about how email templates are developed in marketing tools, including some best practices for that build out. I think if you've ever worked with Engaging Networks, one thing you know is it's a very powerful tool with a lot of flexibility, and there's many different ways to do the same thing. And so what we're going to share is our preferred approach, one we've used for several clients, and maybe that can inspire the approach that you want to take, or inspire other questions that you need to be asking before you go down that road.
And then, and then we wanted to talk about what that day-to-day experience was using the marketing tools and do a little bit of kind of anticipation or scenario mapping of what your questions might be. So we'll have a little bit of Q&A that we'll model at the end, thinking about what those questions are that you might have. So we're not taking away your Q&A time, but Brian will ask me some questions about what it is like to use marketing tools, and I'll answer them from our lived experience using them.
Also, Austin is going to play referee on the questions. And if there's a question that is just really relevant to what we're talking about at the moment, Austin will let us know, but Angela and I won't be super actively monitoring chat. Otherwise, all those questions we'll have time to get to them. And then anyone who knows Angela or I, we're pretty accessible. So if conversations move offline or extend after this call, no problem, we can keep that going. So I gotta throw in a little silliness. Email templates, how do they work? I think we all know what an email template is, but what does it mean when it comes to marketing tools and transitioning off of Email Classic? I got a short video I want to share, again, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Here's a video of what Email Classic looks like. What you see is a number of configurable blocks. And then when you edit those blocks, you will have a WYSIWYG editor. That's what those editors are called. You can also change out images. So really, you got an image block and a text block, and that text block can have code. So that was Email Classic. And if you haven't seen Marketing Tools, if this is your first time, here's just a quick little preview of what it looks like. This might also help you know which one you're on. Marketing Tools is a more full-featured interface where you can develop blocks that you can then load inside of Engaging Networks. It allows for a high degree of configurability, high degree of personalization. And once those blocks are built, it requires little to no coding for the email production folks who are actually building out the email. So it's pretty big game changer. So why use Marketing Tools? I think there's four big motivating factors. You might have some more that are specific to your own use case, but the most important one is eventually Email Classic is going to go away. So whether you decide to move sooner or later, that's up to you. I know Engaging Networks would prefer everybody sooner than later. And my recommendation would be to do it during a down period. The last thing you want to do is be like moving to Marketing Tools and learning that whole new process in your organization during end of year. So, maybe the first 6 months of 2025 is the time to make that transition. Once you're set up in Marketing Tools, I really do think Engaging Networks has done an incredible job with the interface that your email production folks will be working in. And I think it can increase your email velocity. So how quick from, hey, we want to make an email, we wrote some copy in a Google Doc or wherever, and now we need to get it into production and scheduled for sending. I think that email velocity can be dramatically improved with a well-built out Marketing Tools implementation. One of the other things is I love what Engaging Networks is doing with segments in terms of your ability to drill down in how you're targeting your supporters. I know that is also going to be continuing to evolve this year. So if you get onto Marketing Tools, you're going to benefit from that. Like, I don't think there's any more development happening on Email Classic. So if you want the cool stuff that Ian's going to be probably demoing on future webinars, you got to get onto the new tools. So it's also an incentive to do that. And I touched on it when we were watching that video, but there's a high degree of enhanced customization, as well as a number of new features that are just a part of Marketing Tools that are not going to be brought to Email Classic. I think, as you make this transition, again, the big things getting to almost the scenario where your everyday person doesn't need to know how to code for email. I don't know if that's a lived pain point, but it is for me. If you've ever coded for email, it's a miserable experience. My goal at Foresight is one day that in the future that we never have to code an email again. I don't mind doing the templates. I don't mind doing the blocks, but there is no joy for me or for our developers when we have to code for email. But it is a really solvable problem inside of Engaging Networks now. And the only time you'll have to code after the initial build out is when you want to do something completely new, new layout, new structure, completely new design. You're just sending those day-to-day emails, you should be able to use all the features that you codified into your implementation. It's also a chance to resolve any nagging issues you've had. Just like kind of when you move from one place to another, you do some spring cleaning. Not everything makes that move. Same thing with this. You're going to be able to address any nagging issues you've had as you recode your emails, as well as bring any new features or functionality you would like to have in your email implementation. So we're going to talk about some questions you should be asking yourself. I think probably the biggest one is, are you going to keep your current look and feel? Whether you end up doing this internally or working with a consultant or agency partner for your implementation, this is probably the biggest divergence. If you're keeping your current look and feel, it's a much faster migration. If you're pretty happy with your look and feel, I would probably suggest keeping it. And then potentially at a future date, once you've already started using Marketing Tools, then think about doing a redesign in the new platform. If though you want to go all in and do a new redesign, now is a great time. It's like that move-in houses analogy, perfect time for change. And if you are going to keep your current look and feel, though, one thing we run into, and we like to dot our I's and cross our T's, is your current look and feel actually reflective of your latest branding? Sometimes those email templates were built, years ago, and things slowly have evolved, and the email templates haven't kept up. This is another great opportunity to do that audit. So does it align with your current brand, or are there some small changes, maybe some color tweaks or button styling or something like that? Also, a really important one, do you have one or more brands to support? Most of the organizations we work with have sub-brands. So basically a different aesthetic could be a different logo for a campaign or literally in-house brand that you have. One example I'll use when we did Email Classic, and we had to build 2 separate email templates for this, was for Oxfam Canada, who had an emergency response template, and all the colors went from green to red. So it was vastly different. And so we just built it a separate template. Now with marketing tools, if you have that, you actually can codify those in as options. So you could effectively have one template, but you can toggle it as you need between the 2 different display scenarios. Also, things you could be asking yourself are, what opportunities for improvement exist? I think this is a pretty big one. Like I said, those nagging issues you can resolve. One of the ones that comes up, even in people who have pretty polished email templates, is that buttons break when they're forwarded in Outlook. That's something that you could solve for. Also, you could get into accessibility enhancements. This was something we did for NWF when we were doing their build out. We looked at color contrast, minimum font sizes, image alt tags. As an example, I've seen in the past where client brands, the minimum font size is actually below what is recommended for email. So, hey, it's not exactly on brand, but we're going to prioritize accessibility. So email, we're actually going to bump up the minimum font size by 2 pixels, let's say. So there's an opportunity to do that as well. Also, I would say this is a nice to have, but I love when we can get dark mode support in there. Generally, I would say if you're trying to triage, put dark mode towards the end because it doesn't save a ton of time to do it while you're doing your build out. You absolutely can come back later and retrofit your build out for dark mode support. And man, when it works, it looks great. If you don't know, dark mode is handled differently by every operating system and browser. And you can kind of make recommendations, but there's no guarantee. So dark mode support is all about your QA process, and it just makes it easier to QA dark mode when you know light mode already looks great. And so those templates are already solidified and ready for production. Speaking of production, how much of the build out do you want to be able to be a no code experience? So how many of the options do you want to be able to have in your implementation where somebody who has 0 coding experience can come in and still build a very beautiful content rich and media rich email? If you plan for it, your blocks can accommodate pretty much every scenario you might be thinking about. In addition to the content admin experience, the email production folks, let's give some love for the developers. I think they've been beat up by having to code for email for a long time. And with the new marketing tools, you can actually modernize what your end-to-end process looks like. So how do you develop those templates? How do you develop the blocks? How do you then push that into marketing tools? And then in the future, when you have brand updates, when you have new requirements, what is your end-to-end process? And we'll actually talk about that in a minute because we're a little opinionated about it, but we have an end-to-end process we really like and have used for several clients now. Some bonus questions, and probably maybe one of the most important ones is which stakeholders need to be involved and at what stage? We've had issues with this where folks weren't included that should have been early on, and some development or design had already happened. And then they identify, hey, so-and-so wasn't included in that process. Let's get them involved. And they've got feedback. Maybe they have additional needs. Maybe it competes with something existing, but better to ask that question before you start doing any planning, because I think that would be more appreciated from those individuals. Also, do you have any other brand considerations? these email build outs can range anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. And if it's in the case of a few months, are you doing a redesign? Do you want to wait until the redesign is done and maybe launch it afterwards, or plan it to launch concurrently? I think timing considerations can save you a lot of unnecessary back and forth if those things are in the works as well. And actually, I'm sorry, Angela, I skipped this over. I skipped over this. I was kind of curious about, when I was talking about stakeholders, who you had involved, because I think RAN is representative of kind of a number of organizations in terms of size and structure on engaging networks. And I think it might be helpful to just share, who you had involved when you were doing your build out.
Yeah, no, it is a good question. I've found when I joined RAN that our organizational structure is a little bit different than others that I had partnered with before coming to RAN. For example, we have a development team that does fundraising for like gifts over 1,000, and our digital team, which I am on, does small dollar gifts. So we actually have like a lot of autonomy over our web assets, our web properties, our digital channels. So we do partner with our development team and then our comms team. So like for public facing messaging, our communications team is separate. So they're stakeholders. Our development team does fundraising. So we're actually 3 different departments who have 3 different stakeholders, but we are the decision holders on our web properties, right? So like it is really challenging to be like, everyone needs to have a say, but we ultimately have the decision-making power on what things look like because we work with our digital audiences, but they're small dollar donors for fundraising purposes. So like it's actually quite unique in my experience. So we did, make sure to share with our development team. We did share with our communications team, but ultimately, I think we are trusted by those teams to make the decisions. And so what we did leans heavily into your bonus questions 2 and 3, is that we had made some brand changes to our landing pages for engaging networks advocacy donation pages. And so we use this as an opportunity to design our email templates to follow the new designs of our landing pages. So we worked with Foresight to redesign our email templates in line, basically uplifting our templates to now look like our landing pages, which we emulated across our website. So everyone agrees with that strategy, that approach. And so once we had agreement on that, then we rolled out that brand design. And to your question 3, we have an on-site developer who was able to manage that process.
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out to your developer. They're incredible. And so as Angela mentioned, we did the design and then handed it off to in Figma, and then handed it off to RAN's developer for implementation. There are only client project where we've done that. We've actually done the inverse before as well. A client has come with design and we've coded it. And then we've also done design and coding. So we've kind of done all the permutations at this point. If you have someone in-house who has the time and is comfortable doing email build out, definitely take advantage of them. If they're not super familiar with coding for email, you can learn it, but it's so much like built up knowledge from doing it. And you might benefit from someone who's been down that road before. You can very easily chase your own tail doing email coding. So one of the things as you're starting to do your build out that you want to think about is whether you're using a new design or you're keeping your existing design, is how it's going to translate into marketing tools. And marketing tools is a block-based email builder. And so the first thing you could do, and if you thought you were going to get out of this without having to create Google Docs or spreadsheets, you're wrong. There's many places Google Docs or other Word documents are going to be involved in this end-to-end process. But one of the first things you could do is collect a superset of the emails that represent all the looks and feel that need to be represented in marketing tools. Then start breaking them down into your horizontal blocks. So blocks that span kind of the full width of the page. And then start grouping those blocks. So you might find that like, hey, this block is the same, except this one has like a CTA button at the bottom and this one doesn't. And this block is the same as that one, except the color is different, or it does or does not have an image. And when you have those groupings together, then you now know that you can craft that as a single block with different options inside of marketing tools. So start with the Google Doc because it's the easiest to work in there, and break it down into those discrete full width horizontal blocks and group your blocks together so then you can figure out what different options are needed and then start defining those options. So in the block builder, you can add fields, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But you can define that this is a, this is the image URL, this is the title, this is the body copy, this is the image width in pixels, this is the color of the CTA button. But start defining that in text, much quicker to do it here. And then also include screenshots for ease of reference. Yes, you could, just talk about it. But I don't know about you. It's hard to like be context shifting so much when there's going to be potentially 20, 25 blocks in here. Much easier to be like, here's a screenshot of, the 3 different ways this block appears. And when you're talking about it, you can understand exactly what's being referenced without needing to go context shift and like find an email, an existing email, and see what it's being referred to. So this is probably the biggest change in marketing tools. They created something called replacements. It's a powerful concept, and replacements can be defined and used both on the email template, which is the wrapper, as well as the blocks, which are the majority of the content inside the email template. Replacements are admin defined fields. So this is going to be like your developer or consultant working in marketing tools to create each option. And then those options can be referenced in code via merge tags. If you've ever used WordPress before, think kind of similar to what Advanced Custom Fields does, ACF, but a little simplified. I'm a big fan of the way this was implemented. We really like it. And we'll have some more examples below of interacting with like complex blocks that have 10 different options defined within the block. We talked about replacements, and I just wanted to start with that because it's kind of at the core of how you think about breaking down the way you're going to structure and do your build out. The next are the email templates. These are code wrappers, and you can put content in there that is not editable. So if you don't want someone to be able to edit the header or the footer, you could put that in your template in a way that still appears in the email, but is not user editable. You can also define replacements on the email template, and I'll talk about important caveats later, but we usually define like a handful of replacements and then leave most of the kind of definition for the blocks themselves. We like a very lean template in many ways. Blocks are the various pieces of content that you can use to build your email, just like ACF from WordPress, if you're familiar, and how Gutenberg comes together. And on them, you can define as many replacements as you want. And so that could be everything from text to color values in a dropdown, which is something we've done for a client recently, where we put like their 15 brand colors in a dropdown, gave them all really nice names, and then the label corresponds to a hex code, and that hex code gets inserted into the block code via the merge tag that corresponds to the replacement. So it's email templates and blocks, all supported with replacements. That said, though, there are 3 caveats I want to highlight for you. The first is that when you define a replacement on the email template, and you use that merge tag in the email template, you cannot use that merge tag in your blocks. This just means that if you want, for example, to have a replacement on the email template that allows you to choose, let's say, text color, and then you have blocks with text, and you want that text to be influenced by the choice at the email template level, you're not referencing the merge tag. Instead, what you're doing is you're setting a style on the email template in the head that then cascades down and applies to the other blocks. The same is also true. You can't reference block replacements inside of email templates. They kind of just live where they're at. Number two is when you configure a page template, you can also add blocks to it. You could leave it blank. And basically, let's say you have a header and a footer and a central content area. And when someone uses that email template, they then have to add in every block. Or you could add in like 5 blocks just by default. And then the person building the email, when they select that, they'll see all those blocks and they can remove them, add in more blocks, whatever it might be. One thing to know, though, is if you create multiple email templates and add the same block to multiple email templates, and then within that block, you select a default option. Let's say there's 10 colors and you select the 5th one on one of the email templates. That block used in other email templates will also select its 5th color. It can be a little confusing at times, but that's just an important caveat as well. And then finally, one of the things we decided is that we wanted more granular control over how images were coded in the blocks. And so instead of using the image field, and there's different field types for these replacements like text and drop down, just like when you create custom supporter fields in Engage in Networks. We wanted more control. So one of the things we did was we used a text field to define the image URL. We used the text field to define the pixel width. And the reason we did that is that most of our images will be 2x, basically double the display resolution. What that gives you is a very sharp image on high DPI displays, basically anything produced by Apple since 2011. If you've ever been on an Apple product and you've seen a blurry image, that's because, let's say it's 200 pixels wide. That image is 200 pixels, but to look sharp on a high DPI display, it needs to be 400 pixels wide and twice as tall. So we wanted that level of granular control. So we use text fields for the image URL, text fields for defining the display width, and then a text field also for adding an alt tag. So I just want to show you what this looks like coming together. And this is straight out of Rand's account. So I just dropped in and copied one of their emails. And what you can see is someone had already added a number of blocks kind of down here at the bottom. It's not editable. So the header and footer is pre-canned. Here we've got a number of baked in email level settings. There I could add profiles if I want. These are some global variables. Go ahead, Angela.
Just to add, so the way that we've configured those, the global settings, those are how we've configured those blocks within our templates so that we can go in and be like, okay, we may need to adjust that unsubscribe. We may need to adjust those donation forms. But if you go back to edit on the visual editor, you'll notice there are if you just kind of go, on the video, if you could get to the footer, just visualize the footer. Did you capture it on the video?
I definitely did. There we go.
Aha, there you go. That dark green spot is not editable. So there are some things that we know, like mechanically, we may need to edit some things like the links, but you can't go in and edit the copy. Like you can't go in and change the logo on our template. So if you did, we have a completely different discrete email template that you would have to use that has an editable footer. So like they're just like, so this is the level of like build out that our developer has gone in to be like, okay, mechanically, sometimes we do need a different donation link, but you can't make the footer ever look different because this is our brand guideline. And so this is, if you do need it to look different and have different copy, there's a different template for that. And so we wanted to just give you kind of a visual representation of that.
Yeah, and this is a good place to pause because it really demonstrates the difference between Email Classic and marketing tools. You look right now that that Dan team signature block is selected, and on the right hand side you can see, hey, this is just a generic signer block, and you can change the name, you can change the team title, you can change the image, and you have several of these pre-canned for common signers where it's already got all of that filled in. But also maybe you have someone, a one-off, all right? And then you could come in and it's codified in there. So you don't need to touch code. You just add the block and then change the values on the block.
Yeah, that's correct. We would just change all of the copy line by line and then go into the image gallery and swap out the image. And the actual styling will style the image into this little circle. And then we move on from there.
I do want to point out kind of some cool design things that we were able to do with you, and Margot during implementation was able to make them work. One of them is just this transition from kind of the white to the dark green with this almost SVG like layered canopy. I love that. I love breaking out of boxes. So how can you bring some more organic feel to your content? And that was one of those touches where it was just like a collaboration between myself and our designer, thinking about how we can break that up. And I had the idea and he went 10 times better with it than it was even in my head. Also, what's cool is down below, you see that donate $10, give monthly. That could be created as like a really complex table. I think maybe Margot even tried. Instead, what ended up working best is actually those are just two images, and they're Retina resolution. So they look perfectly crisp and clear, just like native text. And so what's also cool by making them images is the whole element there is a clickable element. And it just, again, the leaves kind of poking up above the box, creating that organic feel. Just some nice touches that you can get away with that didn't really actually require a ton of coding, just some creative thinking. I just want to show this, which is, so we were seeing how when you kind of modify something, you see the update in real time, which is, I think, is pretty powerful. Also, you get this beautiful new media library when you go to select different image assets. And when you add blocks, your whole block library appears here, as well as several pre-canned ones that Engaging Networks offers. What's cool is that, after you're done doing all your coding, and I think I have a slide for this, you can go back and add screenshots. I'm a visual person. I think these screenshots are a must-have if you're doing custom blocks. A title is not enough. You really want to see what you're adding. And so you just kind of build up your block library over time, and it just becomes more and more powerful because you'll be able to, even if you go through a complete rebrand, you could update those blocks in place and continue to use them with the new look and feel. Then here we're adding different profiles. So profiles are integrated seamlessly into marketing tools. So added a profile, and here, this is a horrible example, but just proof of concept, that with the two profiles, they would see a different label for the individual. But obviously, I think you can think of some better ways to use profiles than that. So you're probably feeling like Science Dog here. You're like, what am I doing? So I want to give you the end-to-end, I don't know if you could call it a recipe card, but kind of the end-to-end flow and process that we developed and is our preferred approach when we get to do the whole build out in marketing tools. So the first thing I want to note is that you should empower your developers to not be stuck in the past. Email coding has pretty much been almost unchanged for a long time. However, there is a relatively new kid on the block called MJML, which is short for Mailjet Markup Language. We actually started using it back in the Email Classic days, and kind of like in the middle of our tenure building out Email Classic email templates, we switched to MJML, and there was no looking back. It's absolutely fantastic. It basically allows you to write really clean code that then compiles into the insanity that is cross email client markup. This way you can know that what you're writing is either going to look perfect in all those email clients, or you're going to have very, very few issues to resolve when you get to that QA. Just a major, major time saver. It's also pretty intuitive, and it's well documented and open source with an active community. So it's not like you're kind of learning something alone. It's actually makes email coding fun again. One of my favorite parts is it has built-in error checking. So you can't write something in MJML that will compile erroneously. Like, it forces you to write good email code. And then also, just because it's open source, there's a lot of block examples. Or if you see someone else who has MJML examples, you could pull that in and use that and adapt it for your design and branding. But we start with MJML, so we do our email coding there. And if you have ever done email coding, you're probably working in a code editor. And what's nice is MJML, in many of the most popular code editors, has a real-time previewer integration. So just like with marketing tools, when you're making a change, it's really nice to see it on the side there as you're making the change. The same is true with MJML. You could have your code editor where you're writing the MJML on one side, and on the other side, you're seeing a real-time update of what the email template looks like. Once that's done, we then break it down into that wrapping email template and then the individual blocks. Load that into Engaging Networks with all the replacements for the different variables. And then we go into quality assurance testing, which, Angela, I think you had some thoughts and recommendations to share on that.
Yeah, we used Litmus quite heavily. Like, that's not necessarily an endorsement of like, use Litmus, you must, but like, pick a service for testing, use multiple services, like whatever. But we would have been hard pressed to be confident in our outputs without an email testing service. It's really hard to gauge without multiple devices, without multiple email clients, like just the variety of email clients and browsers and everything, like, is impossible to gauge, and exhausting for one human or one team to really capture. So having a testing service made it really more manageable for our developer. So it was a cost, and we had to, budget for it accordingly, but it gave us a lot more confidence in our output and helped identify those things like Outlook, which I see a number of comments in the Q&A section flagging those persistent Outlook problems. And so it is really helpful to use one of those services, and budget accordingly, like the higher tiers, so that you can send enough volume.
Yeah, I'll even add that Foresight doesn't do email coding without access to a Litmus account. So we don't have one of our own because we don't do it all the time. But if a client request comes in, we'll spin it up for a month and use Litmus. There's another one also called Email on Acid, which coincidentally was bought up by a company that also bought the company that makes MJML. I'm still a fan of Litmus. Litmus gives you a little bit more information. That said, though, Email on Acid allows effectively like unlimited monthly tests, where Email on Acid or Litmus, let me correct that. Email on Acid allows unlimited monthly tests. Litmus, I learned you have a monthly limit, and there's nothing you could do to increase that limit. You just have to create a new account. So if you were doing wildly complex development, you might actually need both. If you had like multiple sub brands and it was just voluminous, or you're going to have to pace yourself and not actually, every time you run a Litmus test to see the results in the different email clients, not actually test all of them. You need to be more selective with the ones you're using. So after the quality assurance testing, that's where you want to then take screenshots of those blocks and update the block configuration. So you get those pretty little previews. That's just going the extra mile, and it's 100% worth it. It's kind of like the cherry on top. It makes it so much nicer. Finally, take advantage of the fact that Engaging Networks then lets you export the blocks and email template out of marketing tools. So not only do you have the MJML, not only do you have the HTML it compiles into, but also you're going to have the final email templates and blocks in the markup that Engaging Networks has for it. That way, let's say someone goes in there and accidentally changes something. Maybe it's paranoia. You have a backup that you could then import and just kind of refresh the page template or the block with that. It's free for GitHub repository. Your email code is nothing secret. Take advantage, throw it on a public repo, share it in the community. Go for it. And this is the last thing is that take time to create or update documentation around this flow, around the individual blocks, around the different options. Email templates live for a long time, and developers come and go, consultants come and go. The best time you're going to have at actually creating this documentation is in the beginning. Trying to retroactively do it later on is not great. One of our clients, we did a build out, and the documentation was about 10 pages. But what it meant is that someone could come in from both a email production point of view as well as a developer point of view and would know everything they need. So take advantage of that and create yourself some documentation. We're going to get to Q&A here in a second, but I just had one thing to share to show that we're always still learning. I learned something new about email this year, coincidentally about Outlook. And I don't know if anyone's ever done email testing where you see like a sliver of a color. It's barely a pixel, right? It's like a fraction of a pixel, just this like sliver of a line. Maybe your background colors aren't, completely matching up, and you just have like this one line of a color popping through. I found out this year that Outlook has its kind of own way of doing sub-pixel rounding. And a way to avoid that is anytime you have pixel definitions. So if you're defining font sizes, margins, padding with pixel units, Outlook doesn't like anything that's not divisible by 4. So one way to avoid that is anytime you're doing a pixel definition in code is make it divisible by 4, and that could help prevent you some troubleshooting down the line. So we've got a bunch of questions that we already wrote up that I think Angela can speak to, but also I'm sure we've probably got some starting to pop in chat. So Angela, have you been monitoring chat at all?
Yeah, I answered just a few of them, and I know Marcy's also answering them. So we're trying to do this live. So let's keep going.
Okay. Well, these are questions for you. And feel free to skip over any of the ones you feel like we've already answered. But yeah, do you remember roughly how long you've been using marketing tools for?
When it launched. So basically, I think in its beta, or like when it was like first available in the Engaging Networks platform, we started developing our templates. And so that was like over like end of year, December, January period. Sorry, I have a weird camera. Remove, yeah. And so we basically prepared and started split testing our marketing tools templates in beta.
Yeah, you guys were the first, I think. I don't know. I'm sure Ian could pull some stats. I was actually curious because the pitch I've been making is that I think if you do this implementation well, you can basically make email production no code or low code. Has that been your experience with folks who are doing these email build outs?
So as I mentioned, like we have a number of email templates, so it is a bit of a misnomer to say it's no code because like we have a developer on staff, like so every template has been produced through a lot of trial and error and a lot of like this doesn't work in dark mode and Outlook is a nightmare, finessing, we have blocks that are styled for quotes, we have blocks that are styled for full bleed, we have multiple different types of call to action buttons. But like for our team members who now produce emails, they do no coding. So there in that regards, yes, like and so I think I said in the chat, if I'm managing to talk to people, it is very efficient for our team members to produce an email between 15 and 25 minutes from start to QA. But that is because we have someone who has built out 6 unique email templates with robust component blocks that they can drag and drop.
I remember in older systems that people would do that kind of like litmus testing with every email they were sending. So it wasn't just the templates and like the one-off QA, it was every email. And I don't think most folks do that anymore, right? Like you're not testing you're not QAing for like display cross email clients every email anymore,
Yeah.
are you?
Like we will QA for copy tracking, source coding.
Yep.
We'll check to make sure that it appears correct on our phone and our desktop. Like we're not super robust because if we're using the template to make our email, things usually behave as expected. And we'll run
Mm-hmm.
into things occasionally, like the most recent example is like bullet points weren't behaving as expected on mobile. So, like, we'll run into things of that nature where just like this was working historically, but maybe something went wrong, which will require some high level troubleshooting that some folks on our team can do. But like that's something that we can't do within the email builder itself. It has to be taken out and gone into the email template builder. So that's not work that can be done in email production. It has to be done outside of it. So in that sense, the bug troubleshooting and bug fixing that you can do in email classic doesn't exist anymore in marketing tools. It's something that we have to do outside of that.
Yeah, it makes me think back to websites, right? When websites were just an HTML file, it was like boom, edit it
Yeah.
right there. You can do
Mm-hmm.
all your troubleshooting in it. Now it's like a complex system, and it is more complex, but I think there's some benefits
Mm-hmm.
you definitely get from that complexity. Um, Being mindful of time, I think we can go through a few more of these. One of the things I wanted to highlight, and you touched on it, Angela, was just I think you guys have a really solid process for creating email from like concept to copy to coding to launch. Could you just share with folks what your flow is when kind of an email comes down the pipeline and you have to start working on it?
Yeah, so very top line. We have a digital campaign strategist or, fundraising strategist who will write the copy, it'll get approved. So we work in an external Google document for our copy. Then we'll make a landing page. And then basically, once those two things are done, we'll go in, pull we'll pick whatever relevant email template we'll use. We'll build out the email in our marketing tools. The individual who built it will link to the landing page. We've got our own internal system of source coding because we sync to Razor's Edge. So we have to make sure all of our source coding syncs and everything. So the first person will go through QA. Then we send it internally for another team member to QA. So we use the marketing tools testing to send that email to them. So they'll QA that. And then basically we push it to that person, they'll go through it, and then we can then push it to the recipient to review the email and then launch. The email production itself is what Brian demoed on screen, where it's just a visual editor. We drag and drop the blocks that we need, and we use the Google document as a reference for the copy that we need, and we can just paste it into the blocks, pull references, pull images from our image library, or add graphics as necessary. That's very seamless and analogous to Email Classic. But having the copy external, the landing page already built, and a tracking convention that we already have on hand, all of these things kind of pull together. And then our approval process. And then the testing mechanism is familiar with Classic, and we can send it to an external person to get approved. And yeah, everything from there, I think, falls very seamlessly and similarly to Classic, where we can schedule it. Now, though, however, with segments launching, you can now pick between the legacy audiences or the new segments audience. And so we have now been testing some of the new segments as well.
Can I jump in?
I love segments. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Austin.
Yeah, no, you're good. Just related to what you were just kind of moving to, it sounds like there's actually a couple questions on how. So one is, how has your target and segments changed since using marketing tools? Has there been any shift from what you were doing previously to what you are doing now, or has there been no change?
We've been using the legacy audiences predominantly without much change. We just shifted over to the segments very recently with the rollout from Engaging Networks. And I don't think that there's been any change, but the general sentiment from our team is that segments has better ease of use and more utility.
That's what we like to hear. That's good. Good thing for sure. Thanks for that. One other one that's kind of like down the list here, but that's again unrelated to what this switches looked like. Somebody asked, would you mind speaking a little bit to next suggested GIF functionality in marketing tools and broadcast, like what that's kind of looked like?
The next suggested gift, you can only have one link. Brian, back me up. Like you can only have one.
Currently you can add a single NSG link to your email template.
Yeah, so our most recent implementation of this was at end of year. So we could only have one next suggested gift amount. So that is a difference. And so your mileage may vary. But for profiles, I think that is something that is feature rich in marketing tools. So if you needed to have more conditional content for your blocks, the ability to identify profiles per block is really robust. And that's something that's just much easier to navigate in marketing tools. So if you wanted to do a lot more content testing and targeting, that's really, really easy. So if your end goal is personalization, you can do a lot more of that in marketing tools.
That's good.
While we have 1 minute left, I do just want to highlight that we put together a checklist of kind of everything we talked about and the considerations you might want to have before doing your own build out. And if you would like a copy of this presentation, you can just go to foresightstudios.com/marketing tools. There's just a public Google slide sheet that you'll be able to view, and then you can check out that checklist. Also, if you want to learn any more about the other Engaging Networks work we do, which is predominantly page templates and support with the fundraising and marketing teams, you can go to foresightstudios.com/en to learn more about our services.
Yeah, Brian and Angela, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, you're super welcome. And to Marcy's point, I did look in our platform, and yes, we've been using marketing tools since 2023. So 2 years. So please reach out to us. We have a lot of lived experience. I'll put my email in the chat as well. Hold on. It's Angela that ran. There you go. Yeah, so anything we can do to help, happy to do so.
Amazing. Thank you both for being here, and let's keep the conversation going, and appreciate everybody being here, and everybody be safe and stay warm, please.
Thanks, Angela. Thanks, Austin.
Everyone.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.